Hi, I'm Harry Katz. I serve as Dean of the ILR School here at Cornell University. I'm also a professor of collective bargaining at the ILR School. In my role as a professor of collective bargaining, I've done extensive research about labor negotiations. I've periodically observed parties at the bargaining table, and I've, on some occasions, given advice to either labor or management about their collective bargaining negotiations. The video you'll see is produced and distributed by the ILR School because it fits within the mission of ILR. ILR conducts research, teaching, and outreach activities in the broad domain of work, employment, and labor policy. And collective bargaining is at the centerpiece of work and employment in unionized settings in the United States. And we hope you find this video instructive and helpful.
All right, today we're going to have our first bargaining session.
It's about time. We need to get this thing moving.
Don't get too excited, Jim. Not that much is going to happen today.
Steve's right. Today we're just going to get introductions out there, we're going to lay out the ground rules, and we will give them our opening proposals.
But Dominic, do you think management will have a lot of their proposals too?
Probably not fleshed out in too much detail, but we can expect that they will come to the table talking about concessions. I've spoken with Alan, and he's made that much clear.
I hope he told him to shove his concessions.
I didn't bother. We'll be able to express that at the table, and more importantly, our members are going to be able to express that in how they support us. But just to make it clear, I'm not going to be doing any one-on-one bargaining without clearing it with you guys first. Let's just focus on today. And as we agreed, I'm going to do most of the talking, except each of you will have one or two proposals that you will explain after I introduce them.
So what if they ask some kind of questions I can't answer?
Unless it's a question that you have been specifically prepared to answer, I'm just going to say that we need to take a caucus and talk about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry. If it's like 3 years ago, they'll just ask a few clarifying questions. We don't go into any real details.
Yeah. Today, the important things are that we set a good tone and that we show them how serious we are.
They better understand we're serious. After all the surveying, the committee meetings, the one-on-ones, they should know that we're ready to go.
They'll know, but Alan won't let on.
Well, we need to do the same thing. So, as we agreed, no unplanned emotions, no outbursts at the table. The fact of the matter is, we're going to need to address the costing issues. Now, the figures they bring to the table are going to make it look like everything we propose costs trillions. But that's why we've got our own figures and we've done our own costing estimates. So, let's prepare for that now, and let's take one final look over everything before we go in there.
Anna, are you ready with your presentation on the finances and our future projections?
Yes, I have the PowerPoint all set and copies of the charts and graphs right here to give to them.
Good. And Christine, a lot of the proposals were generated from your operations people. And so when questions come up, we're going to be expecting you to help us with the answers. But don't let them draw you into a discussion where you end up saying more than you want to say. So when they do ask questions, I'm going to tell them that we're going to take a caucus and get back to them.
Okay. I'll definitely take your lead. You're the bargaining expert. One thing I'd like you to do, though, is just kind of keep in mind that when it comes to operations, ultimately I'm the one who's going to have to live with the aftermath of whatever happens.
Okay, I understand. What are your people out in the field hearing from the union members about bargaining?
A little bit mixed right at the moment. There's obviously lots going on the union side, but given the economy and the news, people know of other individuals, or employees rather, that are out of work, laid off. So that's definitely, you know, talk around the water cooler.
Okay, well, and that's why we make this presentation, and we're going to keep bringing up to them the reality of the situation so that they understand our concessions proposals are not idle, they're real.
Regarding their committee, I made a couple of notes here. Marie is going to be the one most concerned about job security.
Right.
Wild Man Jim, no surprise, got on the committee with a no concessions platform. Steve is the realist.
Okay. And Dominic, the union rep, he's a realistic person, but he's no pushover, and I expect these are going to be difficult negotiations. So we're just going to keep pounding away that the reality of the economy and where things are headed, so that they understand that they got to take us seriously on this concessions proposal. But let's do a run through before we start the session on your slideshow.
Sure.
In the video, you'll see the parties making offers, responding to each other, holding caucuses. Caucuses are meetings that either side will call in the middle of bargaining. They're not uncommon. Labor, the union side, will feel the need to talk things over on their own terms and not in front of management. Similarly, management will feel it needs to reformulate its strategy, contemplate how they're going to respond to any request or new demand by the union, and they'll caucus periodically until they ultimately reach a settlement or reach impasse.
At the beginning of the video, we see the parties engaging in caucusing, which is a key part of labor management bargaining. Before you get to the bargaining table, you want both sides to be knowledgeable and comfortable at what they're going to say at the table. At this stage, we also see a lot of interorganizational bargaining. That's the name we use for the process where you bargain within your own side. Try to make sure that all parts of the union are on board with the proposals and that everybody in the management team is together in their proposals. And that's a key first stage of the negotiations. We see the lead negotiators taking the key role in bringing their own side together. And that's something that an experienced negotiator will know that he or she needs to do before they get to the bargaining table. Make sure they have a strong, united team and a consistent position that they're going to present.
Glad we could all be here for this open session of negotiations. With me today is Anna, our budget and finance expert, and Christine, our chief of operations, who you probably all know. Anna's going to be making a presentation on our financial situation.
For our side, we have Steve, who is representing the blue-collar workers, Jim, who's going to be representing the clerical workers, and Marie, who will be representing the professional workers. And I think you've all met me, but in case you haven't, I'm Dominic, and I'm going to be the chief negotiator for the union.
Okay, and I'm Alan, chief negotiator for management.
So now that we got everyone introduced, we've laid out the ground rules, I'd like to make an opening statement before we get to our first proposal.
Fine, but I just wanted to make a statement myself that this negotiation is going to be tougher than any before, and that the management is dead serious about getting concessions this year.
Well, from our point of view, it's management and your political allies who have made this economic disaster that we all have to deal with, and our members are not going to bear the burden of that.
Well, regardless of how this economic disaster happened, it happened, and we have to deal with it. And as you'll see from the presentation that we're going to do later today, it affects us very, very strongly.
Well, the reality of the situation is we're going to come to this table and get our families what they deserve. But this is a conversation that can wait until after Anna has told us her tale of hardship.
Okay, be snide if you want, make comments like that, but it won't change the reality.
Our first proposal concerns work out of title, and we have a number of things that we'd like to get done on that issue.
The first session of negotiations face-to-face with the other party often involve more extreme positions where each side tries to stake out a strong position to enter into negotiations. It'll often be a period when you'll see signaling going on where the negotiators will try and frame how the argument's going to proceed. For example, we see that management is trying to signal that these are going to be tough negotiations. They're likely to look for concessions. By concession bargaining, we mean bargaining where something that's an existing benefit that the workers have may be taken away, may be reduced down. In this case, we see signals that health care costs are going to be an issue that dominates concession bargaining. What that means is that management is concerned about rising health care costs and is hoping to have the workers take on some of the costs of providing health insurance. Because this is something that pulls back from a benefit the workers have had in the past, management tries to set that tone early by staking out that these will be tough negotiations over this issue.
In this negotiating session, what you see is both sides really fighting to set the tone. They both want to show that they're taking a strong position, that they're fairly aggressive and pushing for what their side needs. And both sides really want to set the tone for this, which means arguing even about the opening statement. They can't even get past that because they both want to be in charge, to establish who's in charge at this negotiating table. And they're really trying to seize that from each other, and both lead negotiators are being quite assertive in making sure that they have the upper hand in the negotiation. When we see them initially talking to each other, it's clear that there's a lot of animosity. It's not a good relationship. They're not starting from a point where they feel there could be a win-win outcome or they anticipate a lot of collaboration. They clearly feel that this is a kind of win-lose situation. One side will win and the other will lose, and both sides are determined not to be the loser. And it's unfortunate in bargaining when you start from this situation, but it's also the reality a lot of the times. Both sides feel that the other side is out to get them, that the other side doesn't understand their position, and that they're really at odds, and they're both fighting to get a bigger piece of the pie. Having a low trust relationship at the bargaining table can make bargaining much, much harder.
I want to talk a little bit about the context that shapes any real negotiations. And the context is the environment determining the bargaining power held by labor and management. The study of labor relations shows that the most critical determinant of bargaining power is the strike leverage that either the union or management has in any particular setting. Strike leverage matters whether a strike occurs or not because the parties in negotiations won't agree to a negotiated settlement that's very different from the outcome they would get if there was a strike. Why would management offer the union much, much more than it thinks it can get if it takes a strike? And vice versa, why would the union accept something that management offers that's much below what the union thinks it can win if it would conduct a strike? So strike leverage matters. Again, whether or not the strike occurs, it's the threat of the strike that often drives negotiations.
Okay, I think what we should do right now is return to something that we've been discussing the last few sessions, which is our proposal regarding employees working outside their job title.
Okay, that's fine, and we want to return to talking about mandatory overtime.
Fair enough. We actually have a proposal for you on that. Do you have a similar proposal regarding the work out of title?
Yes, we do. Let me pass it out to you. And as you look, you'll see that we urge you, excuse me, on the issue you said was most important, and that was the payment when it starts after working in a job out of title. And it's currently 3 days before you get the pay, and now we're willing to lower that to 2 days. But this proposal is contingent on getting an agreement on our ability to sign mandatory overtime.
It's fair enough, and we do have a proposal regarding the overtime, and we will be taking a look at this and let you know what we think of your proposal.
You can't be serious.
You think this is some kind of game? We're dealing with people's lives here. You haven't moved on anything, and you expect us to just sit tight?
Jim, get a grip. You're acting like an amateur.
Yeah, Jim, take a deep breath.
We don't need your advice on how to act. And we definitely don't need antics like what Christine just pulled with our proposal. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a caucus and we are going to give an honest viewing of your proposal and come back with our honest response. What I would recommend is that you do the same with our proposal.
What you see here is a focus on prioritizing issues. Both sides realize that they're going to have to prioritize what's the most important to them, and in turn give up some of their least important issues. Both sides probably have an understanding by this point that they're not going to get everything that they want, so instead they need to figure out what's the most important thing and what, if anything, they're going to be willing to concede. If they won't concede anything, they probably won't get anything. So figuring out the priorities, and for the union that means the priorities for the members, not just for the negotiators, is going to be an important part of the strategy.
Bargaining does sometimes involve theater. Union leaders are elected by their members. They're concerned about how their members feel. So sometimes in the give and take of negotiations at the bargaining table, they'll kind of act out or be overly dramatic. Managers, too, can exhibit theatrical performances, trying to impress their bosses or try and scare the other side. But experienced bargainers will get past the theater and pretty quickly turn to the real issues that underlie their relationship and underlie issues at the workplace.
Can you believe those jerks?
Look, we know they can be jerks, and we knew going in that they might be likely to pull something like that. But what did we say we were going to do?
No, don't react. Take the caucus. They make me so mad. Sorry.
Well, don't worry about it for right now. It might actually end up benefiting us, because now they know how invested we are in the negotiations. That being said, don't do it again.
But Dominic, I'm actually more upset with what's in their proposal. I mean, at the last session, they said they would have some flexibility on work out of title, but this proposal, it goes backwards.
What do you mean?
I mean that the language will make it nearly impossible for anyone to get paid. I mean, I don't see how this is progress.
Well, keep in mind that this isn't their final proposal. I mean, it's good that they moved on the days. And I think we can probably get them to agree to pay from the first day. But we need to straighten out their language on this or there's not going to be an agreement. Don't forget, we didn't make all that much movement on the overtime issue. But we made enough change that they're going to see where we would be willing to move a little more, if they give us what we need on work out of title.
I said we just go back in there and blast them.
That would feel good, but it wouldn't really get us any progress. We're going to have ample opportunity to unload on them later. For right now, let's give them a little bit of credit for the movement that they gave, and then let's take a look at what they've done and explore where there's the flexibility to get what we really need out of this agreement. So we'll see what they say about our overtime counter proposal, but we need to know that until we get the language that we want for work out of title, we are not going to give them what they're asking for on the mandatory overtime. So let's take a look at what they've given us.
As you know, Anna, and Christine, I'll tell you that now, I got the approval we need from upstairs for a final offer. And it's one the union ought to take if they're thinking straight, but it's important that we get a recommendation so this gets voted on and passed and we get this over with. I don't want this to drag on any longer.
I don't know. They beat the members up pretty good. I'm hearing from my managers that about 75% are already wearing union buttons and armbands.
The whole place? Everywhere?
No, departments, the smaller departments are obviously the weaker link. The departments that really seem to count have the most support.
Okay, yeah, but I'm not sure that they can translate that into an ability to strike. People start thinking about the reality of things. I think that they're not going to be so eager to do it, but I don't want to count on them being rational. So I think what we're going to have to do is I'm going to ask Dominic to step outside and explore what it's going to take to get a recommendation to ratify this thing.
Okay.
Here you see the management really trying to disunite the union. They're trying to figure out where different workers have different concerns, where they'll need to focus their energy, which workers would go out on strike. The management wants to divide and conquer the union. They think that that's going to be the best way to get to an agreement. Where the union will want to hide any differences, even if there are differences, they don't really want them to come out at the bargaining table because that could give the management additional leverage.
One interesting tactic we see on the management side being discussed is whether they can split off different factions within the union. Management discusses amongst themselves who the different people are in the union bargaining team and what interests they represent. Good management labor negotiators realize that unions are political organizations with many different constituencies in their membership. Sometimes they can come up with a position that will get some members of the union to split off with the union leadership, and management may be able to get an advantageous deal through dividing the union's house. On the union side, the lead negotiator is going to be very concerned to make sure that his or her team is united and does not allow themselves to be split off by management. If they can keep their team united with a common, consistent position, they'll hopefully be able to come up with a better deal for their side. One of the key determinants of the outcomes of bargaining is the environmental conditions. Particularly important amongst these are the economic environment conditions. In this example, we see bargaining in the context of difficult economic times. This comes up at the bargaining table where the parties discuss the fact that the economic times are tougher, whose responsibility is that, how's that going to impact bargaining?
The leaders of the bargaining teams for labor and management sometimes meet by themselves in what are referred to as sidebars. Now you should take note, these aren't nefarious undercover meetings by the leaders in which they're undermining the interests of their respective side. Most commonly, with mature and experienced bargainers, sidebars can be a critical part of the bargaining process, where taken away from the heated bargaining that might occur in the presence of a full committee, the key leaders can work through problems, can promote integrative issues.
So Dominic, how's it going with your committee? Jim ready to kill you yet?
Jim, how are you doing with Christine?
Yeah.
So, what do you got?
Well, I'm reluctant to put anything out there until I know it's going to fly. You know, there's people on my side who just as soon let you guys walk out.
And there's people on my side who are willing to do it. But before we get there, what do we have now?
Well, we got to get some savings on health care premiums. Everyone else is doing it. And we got to get it. And if we do, we can put some money out there. Bonus in the first year, $750, something like that. So a little bit of money for adjustments, people who are underpaid compared to other jobs. Second year, another bonus, $750. And probably by the third year, we could put like a raise. Everyone gets a percentage raise.
Well, I'm glad to see you moving on those, but the numbers aren't going to cut it right now, especially if you're asking people to pay in for their health insurance premiums.
Well, what if we didn't ask them to pay for employee only? We just put it on the family coverage.
Well, what would we be asking to pay on that?
Oh, at least 50%.
There's no way. There's no way that'll fly.
Well, you know, I'm willing to work with the numbers, you know, as long as we get the savings, you know, we can juggle the numbers.
Well, I'll think about it. I'll take it back. But let's talk. How about the health and safety proposal? I mean, that needs to be in there. We got too many people getting sick, too many people getting injured.
Well, I told you we're getting a new person to take care of that. It's going to be a lot better.
I can't even sell my committee on a new person. let alone the members. They're not believing anything you say right now. They need language. They need language in there addressing the turnaround time of claims. They need language about refusing unsafe tasks.
Okay, so you're telling me that if you get that package more or less like I laid it out, it's going to fly?
I'm telling you, that just needs to be in there.
Yeah. All right.
As far as the other stuff, I mean, look, the thing is, bonuses aren't popular. Why can't you make it a raise in base pay?
Hey, it's expensive. I mean, you want to put the money there, and then it's going to come from somewhere else.
Well, look, we might be able to live with a bonus in the first year if we get some raises for low-paying jobs. The second and third year, we're going to need to see 3% increase in base pay, both years.
Okay, that much is not there, but I'm willing to sit down, let's crunch some numbers, see what we can come up with.
All right, well, let's take a look at it.
This is very common in labor negotiations, that the final deal is reached one-on-one between the two lead negotiators, classically, sometimes late at night, after hours of negotiation, hammering out a deal.
The union here uses the issue of ratification to really push for more from management. They try to imply that while the negotiators, might be willing to take an offer that's on the table, they can never sell that to their members. So management will have to offer something more, otherwise the members will never ratify it. And what they're doing here is saying, it's a kind of good cop, bad cop. We're the good cop. We would accept this reasonable offer, but unfortunately, you'll just have to offer a bit more, otherwise our members will never go for it. And they're clearly trying to gain leverage by saying this.
There's a part in the video where the management representative is telling the union representative about members having to pay a larger portion of their healthcare costs. And the logic that the management representative uses is, well, everyone else is doing it. What does this say about the environment surrounding these negotiations? And one way to understand it is, you know, with the concept of total power and relative power. So total power is what is possible given the economics of the industry and the company and how much there is for both parties to share. And a relative power is the ability of any one of the individual parties to get what they need, what they want out of the negotiation. If economic conditions are good and the firm is experiencing an expansive market, then one could argue that total power is higher. This management in this company could afford an agreement without the concessions that they want from the union. It's possible.
All right, I've been out there, 4 times now with Alan, going back and forth over the final offer. So what we're getting down to now is the most difficult part of bargaining, where we try to figure out if what we can get from them is basically worth recommending. What I'm going to go through now is just the details based on my conversations, they're what I believe we can get as far as they're willing to go. So first off, all of the tentative agreements we made about work outside of title, overtime, that's going to make it into the final agreement, but only if we take the entire package. Second, they will agree to our proposal on health and safety, the last one we gave them. Good. Third, first year they're going to give us a $1,000 signing bonus plus a pool of 3% for special raises. Now, second year, it's a 2% raise in base pay for everyone, and the third year, it's a 2.5% raise in base pay for everyone.
I don't know.
It's better than I expected.
Now, hold on. You haven't heard the health insurance part yet, and that you are not going to like. But we need to weigh the whole thing and make the best decision. So regarding health insurance, there is not going to be a change in what our members are going to pay for the employee-only coverage for the life of the 3-year agreement. But in the second year, members are going to need to start paying 15% of the family coverage. And that's going to jump to 25% in the third year.
That sucks.
Yeah, but does it suck so bad that we're going to go on strike to get more?
Yeah, it doesn't all suck. I mean, there are some good things in here. Do you really think our members would strike over this?
We told our members we wouldn't take any concessions. Striking isn't our only option.
Well, what we told them is that we would do everything we could to resist concessions. And while we have options beyond just a regular strike, what we need to do right now is weigh what management's giving us, what management's offering, versus, is it worth fighting to get more? And so that's what we need to figure out right now.
What we see here is the union trying to weigh the entire proposal. They realize that if they pick apart each line of the proposal, they've won some issues and they've lost some issues, but they realize there's never going to be a contract where they win every issue, and so they have to decide based on the whole package if this was the best they could do for their members and if the concessions are concessions that their members could live with. So they're returning to their priorities, their biggest issues, and weighing the entire contract, not line by line, but as a whole, to decide whether it's something they think their members would go for.
If the union has high strike leverage, that means they're likely to be able to get what they want in the negotiations. If management has the ability to resist a union strike threat, they're more likely to get what they want at the bargaining table. And so the implicit strike threat, even if neither side really wants to strike, is going to influence the outcomes of bargaining.
There's a part in the video where the union leaders are talking about alternatives to strikes. And what might these alternatives be? We know that unions in the US, because they've lost bargaining power since the 1980s due to striker replacements and so on and so forth, have been hesitant to use the strike. And the number of strikes in the US have come down dramatically to less than 20 per year. So that's one of the reasons why we've seen a lot of alternatives to strikes develop. Now, what could these alternatives be? One, they could be public actions that are designed to put pressure on the employer. These are what I call strike substitutes. So it could be, for example, a boycott of the company's goods because the company is not willing to engage in negotiations with you, and this could be either local or national. It could be mobilizing other stakeholders of the company so that those stakeholders then put pressure on the company in order to sort of, negotiate with the union or build collaborative relationships with the union. It could be, these are called generally, corporate campaigns, which is a rubric that is used to cover a whole range of actions. It could be other methods of bringing pressure on the company by embarrassing them in public, by painting them as a corporate outlaw, and so forth. And these are all well-established alternatives to the strike that have gained in both usage as well as effectiveness over the years. And invariably, these kinds of campaigns involve multi-stakeholder, where the unions in the company are working with all kinds of other groups, trying to put pressure on the company to change their view. But those are external kinds of activities. There are internal alternatives to the strike, and the best internal alternative to the strike is non-cooperation. If workers could work just a little bit slower, they could work to the rule, and not, or they could not follow directives. They could make things very difficult for the supervisor, like, for instance, everybody going to the toilet at the same time and leaving the line, the production line empty. So these are all acts of non-cooperation. And to some extent, every time labor and management negotiate a collective bargaining agreement, essentially management is paying for industrial peace and cooperation. And so labor can withhold that cooperation while still working. And this is why the company needs to be really careful, not to ram through an agreement that the workers are not happy with, because if they're not happy with it, they will not cooperate.
Research has shown that there are 4 key sub-processes that make up any collective bargaining negotiations. These sub-processes were well described in a very famous book written by Richard Walton and Robert McCursey. The book is called A Behavioral Theory of Labor Negotiations. A popularized version of their theory appears in the book Getting to Yes, written by Fisher and Urey. It's even available in supermarkets. The Walton and McCursey book will be available in academic and research-oriented libraries. Well, Walton and McCursey had the insight to identify 4 key sub-processes that make up the collective bargaining process. The most important of those 4 processes they labeled distributive bargaining. Distributive bargaining involves issues where one side's gain is the other side's loss. You can also refer to these as zero-sum issues. Labor's gain is management's loss and vice versa on a distributive issue. The most common distributive issue is, of course, wages. Management wants to pay the workers less, the workers want to be paid more. Another distributive issue, the details of which are very complex and vary a lot in any particular negotiations, is all the different fringe benefits that are often a part of a collective bargaining agreement. Pensions, management wants to pay less, the workers want more. Vacation time, workers want more, management wants to give them less. Those are distributive issues, and on those issues there's a difficult process as part of bargaining to settle on an outcome that both sides are willing to accept versus taking the strike and seeing what they'll end up with if they were to go to strike.
You notice that in the video they're bargaining about concessions, and so that's surprising because they should be bargaining about increases in wages. And this, to some extent, is indicative of the shift in bargaining power over the years. In the 1980s, before the 1980s, unions were in a much stronger bargaining power position than management. And I think there are 2 major determinants of why bargaining power has shifted from the labor side to the employer side. One is general increase in competition and globalization. This has created a lot more substitutes for the products that companies make, and it has weakened labor power considerably. Another is the ability of the company to replace striking workers if they do go on strike. And you know, the strike used to be labor's only weapon, so to speak, and if that weapon is taken away from them, then they substantially lose a lot of power.
That in addition to distributive issues, there are what they termed integrative issues in any collective bargaining negotiations. Integrative issues are issues where there are potential joint gains. Issues that can be settled by which both sides will gain. An example of an integrative issue is technological change. A technological change can lead to an increase in productivity and profit for the firm, and also an increase in income and maybe even easier work for the workforce. Solving work rules and dealing with problems. There are other integrative issues, issues that provide the possibility of joint gains. A way to think about an integrative issue is it one in which there can be problem solving rather than the kind of clash of interest that appears in distributive issues. Now, what Walton and McCursey also pointed out is that there was a third sub-process, trust, that critically affected the ability of the parties to negotiate and even identify integrative issues. Where labor and management trust one another more, they're more likely first to identify integrative issues and also more likely to settle those issues in an integrative manner. A fourth sub-process of bargaining is what Walton and McCursey referred to as intra-organizational bargaining. These are issues within each organization, within each side, in contrast to the inter-organizational issues we've been talking about already. An example of an intra-organizational issue concerns differences on the union side. For example, older workers in the union, older workers in the workforce, may be most interested in gaining pension benefit increases, while younger workers may be most interested in higher wages, feeling that they may not be around to collect those pensions. That's an intra-organizational issue. How will the union side decide what matter it's going to push? Similarly, skilled workers may have interests that differ from production or less skilled workers in a plant. As well, there are intra-organizational issues on the management side. They're sometimes harder to see because management often isn't as open, as public, as politically revealing in its diverse interests. But believe me, they exist. Corporate managers may see bargaining issues differently than do plant managers. Some managers may be more antagonistic towards the union, where other managers may be more cooperative and sympathetic to the union. Workers may differ at various parts of the plant from other workers, and managers at one part of the plant may differ in their interests and motivation from other managers elsewhere in the operation. So again, there are complex intra-organizational issues at play, while there are simultaneously these inter-organizational issues. The point of Walton and McCursey, and it was a brilliant one that one sees all the time in collective negotiations, is that all four sub-processes are going on at the same time. And good managers, good unionists, good bargainers have to find a way to balance potential tensions and the changes in the dynamics that occur as they pass from emphasizing potentially a distributive issue to an integrative issue, while they also then may turn to an intra-organizational matter or as well try and promote their trust and relationship with the other side.